Okay, let's dive in. You've shared an article with us that gets right into a pretty significant legal development.
Yeah, involving former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte and the International Criminal Court, the ICC.
Right. So our mission here in this deep dive is pretty straightforward. We're going to take this single source you've given
Mm,
us, pull out the key information, and really help you get a quick, solid grasp of what's happening with his recent appeal.
exactly. It's all about unpacking this specific situation using only the material provided.
Tailored just for you.
Absolutely. And the article, it really lays out the main actions and, the legal arguments quite clearly.
So what's the core event? The big headline.
The main news is that former President Duterte has formally appealed to the ICC. He's asking for something called interim release.
Okay, interim release, and the source gives specifics, right? The filing date.
It does, filed June 12, 2025,
Uh-huh.
by his counsel, Nicholas Kaufman.
And the request isn't just general release.
No, specifically for interim release to an undisclosed country. That's a key detail.
Right. So maybe we should clarify interim release. What exactly does that mean in the ICC context, according to the article?
Good point. It's also called provisional release. And basically it means a temporary discharge for someone who's currently detained by the court, someone in ICC custody.
So temporary freedom, but still under the court's authority.
That's it. And the article mentions this isn't unprecedented. It gives examples, past agreements the ICC had with Belgium, I think, and Argentina.
Okay, so it's a known procedure.
It's a recognized legal mechanism, yes.
Now back to that destination, the undisclosed country. The article really flags that, doesn't it?
It does. While the country isn't named, it's redacted in the document mentioned. The filing apparently states this government has already given its, what was the phrase? Advance and principled agreement.
Wow, okay. To receive Mr. Duterte if he's released.
For the term of his interim release, yes, that suggests some groundwork has been laid.
And this country would impose conditions.
Well, the source quotes the filing saying the receiving government would act in accordance with its domestic law to implement such conditions as deemed appropriate by pretrial chamber the first.
See, trial chamber the first.
Right.
Remind us what their role is.
They're essentially the panel of ICC judges handling the initial phase of a case. They deal with things like arrest warrants, looking at the early evidence, deciding if a case should even go to trial.
So they're the ones deciding on this release appeal.
Correct. They're the decision makers here.
Okay. So the defense counsel, Kaufman, made arguments to this chamber. What reasons did the article say they gave for release?
They laid out several points. Fundamentally, they argue he just doesn't meet the conditions required by the Rome Statute for keeping someone in pretrial detention.
The conditions mentioned in the source. Article 58(1)(b).
Ah, yes. Article 58(1)(b) of the Rome Statute, that's the treaty that, set up the ICC. That part outlines the reasons for issuing an arrest warrant or continuing detention.
Which are?
It boils down to risk. Is there a risk the person will flee or obstruct justice, tamper with investigations, or continue committing crimes?
And the defense says none of those apply to Duterte.
That's their argument. They claim he's not an objective flight risk, his arrest isn't needed to protect the investigation's integrity, and it's not necessary to prevent more crimes.
They sound pretty confident.
The filing, as quoted in the article, is quite strong. It says he must, as a result, be immediately released from ICC custody.
And what about interfering with the case? They address that too.
Yes, they argue the proceedings won't be harmed because the case isn't really at an advanced stage yet, disclosure-wise.
Meaning he doesn't know enough sensitive details.
Their view is his access to confidential information is, quote, negligible. So they're tackling that obstruction concern head on.
And it wasn't just arguments against detention. The article says they proposed conditions he'd accept if released.
Exactly. That's a big part of the appeal strategy, it seems. He's apparently agreed to some quite strict conditions, like refraining from public engagement, no communication with anyone outside his family.
Okay. Anything else?
Yes. Also abstaining completely from using the internet or any electronic devices, no mobile phones.
Wow. That's restrictive.
Yeah.
Seems designed to counter those risk arguments.
Precisely. To show he wouldn't or couldn't interfere or cause issues if released.
Now, here's a really interesting point the article brings up. The prosecution.
The ICC Office of the Prosecutor.
They did not oppose this request for interim release.
Right. And what's fascinating, according to the source, is how the defense interprets this lack of opposition.
How so?
They see it as the prosecution basically conceding, or at least not fighting, the idea that those Article 58 risks flight, obstruction, more crimes aren't strong enough right now to demand detention.
So the defense feels this bolsters their case.
It certainly seems they believe it does, yes. It removes a major potential obstacle.
The defense also mentioned a humanitarian angle.
They did, citing Duterte's age as a compelling humanitarian reason for release.
And connecting that to the undisclosed country.
Yes, describing it as providing a stable and suitable environment for him, considering his age.
Right. Humanitarian factors like age or health can sometimes play a role in these decisions, alongside the risk assessment.
They can be considered by the chamber, yes.
Okay, stepping back a bit. The article briefly gives context on why he's in ICC custody. War crimes allegations.
Yes. The source specifies the alleged crimes listed in the prosecution's original warrant application were crimes against humanity. Specifically, murder, torture, and rape.
Crimes against humanity. That means widespread or systematic attacks against civilians.
Broadly, yes. That's the threshold. Directed against a civilian population.
And the pretrial chamber already made some kind of initial finding.
Based on the material the prosecution submitted, yes. The article states they found reasonable grounds to believe he is individually responsible as an indirect co-perpetrator for the crime against humanity of murder.
Indirect co-perpetrator, what does that mean?
It generally means someone found responsible for crimes carried out by others, often through a system, structure, or policy they oversaw or implemented.
And the time frame mentioned.
The article specifies this relates to acts allegedly committed in the Philippines between November 1st, 2011 and March 16th, 2019.
Got it. The article also helpfully lays out the timeline of how he actually ended up in custody. It seems quite recent.
Relatively, yes. The prosecution applied for the arrest warrant on February 10th, 2025.
Then it was issued secret initially, March 7th.
Right, secret at first,
Yep.
but then reclassified as public very quickly, just 4 days later, March 11th.
And the arrest followed immediately.
The very next day, March 12th, the article says he was surrendered by the Philippine government to the ICC after local authorities arrested him.
And his first court appearance.
Also very prompt, via video link on March 14th, 2025. So yeah, a very rapid sequence from warrant application to detention.
Okay, looking forward then. What's the next big step in the main case itself, according to the source?
That would be the hearing on the confirmation of charges.
Right, where the chamber decides if there's enough evidence to actually go to a full trial.
Exactly. And that hearing is provisionally scheduled for September 23, 2025.
And the article hints at the amount of evidence for that hearing.
It does. It mentions the prosecution is expected to rely on quite a bit of material. At least 421 documents, 9 photos, and almost 16 hours of audio and video files.
That certainly sounds substantial. Gives you a sense of the scale.
It definitely suggests the chamber has a complex task ahead in reviewing all that material before deciding on confirmation.
Okay, so circling back to where we started this specific appeal. The summary is, his legal team wants him released immediately.
To this undisclosed country, yes. Under whatever conditions the pretrial chamber deems appropriate. That's the request on the table right now, according to this article.
Right. So we've done a focused deep dive here just on this article you provided. We've covered the appeal itself, the defense arguments about risks, the conditions offered, the prosecution's non-opposition.
The background charges, the chamber's initial finding, the timeline. Yeah.
And what's scheduled next. So based only on this source, you should now have a clear, fact-based snapshot of this specific legal move.
And thinking about all those details presented in the article, the defense saying he's not a risk, the strict conditions he's agreed to, his age being cited, this prearranged but secret destination, it does leave you with a question to ponder.
Yeah.
When those judges in pretrial chamber, I weigh this unusual request release to an undisclosed place. Under these terms, what specific factors from the article do you think they'll focus on most? What carries the most weight in their decision-making process based on everything we've just unpacked?